Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Hollow and this is Dauntless. Dauntless has been, for years now, the biggest and best Monster Hunter-like experience available due to, well, just how similar it is, while also trying to streamline the experience. And of course, it's free to play and has cross-platform play. Rage has always referred to it to me as the Monster Hunter light game. At the core, you're fighting monsters called Behemoths, you're hunters called Slayers, and you progress the game by steadily improving your equipment and skill by taking on more challenging monsters as you go. Does that sound familiar? It should. Dauntless has had a bit of an up and down history though. The dev teams have made different changes that the player base have both really liked or really disliked. The latest being the Reforged update, which in concept updates and improves the core progression of the game and overhauls how it works. That's been, I would say, a resounding success for new players like myself to find the game much easier to get into, while long-time players had a lot taken away from them to adapt to this new system. Now the game is set up with a new foundation that long-term I think is better for the game, but it needs to be built up from. That Reforged update came over 6 months ago, and I'd say the game is probably ready for another major update, hopefully soon. I'm a Monster Hunter player who's been playing the series for a few years now, and I've played Dauntless on and off since its original beta. Recently, I've been trying the game again during Reforged, so today I wanted to come and make this video and answer two questions. Is it worth playing Dauntless as a Monster Hunter fan? Is it now a good time to get into the game? I'm going to go through the different main aspects of the game and what I think of each, starting with the story, which is completely irrelevant. Basically, the world was torn apart in a sort of cataclysmic event, and with that, the Behemoths, which prey on humans, appeared. Slayers go out and hunt them, and that's the game. Apparently, they tried to add proper story in the first Void update, so maybe in the current endgame with the new minor updates, there's actually story there, but as a new player, it has no effect on my gameplay, and I don't see it at all. Moving on to the structure of the game then. Just like Monster Hunter, we have a main hub that you will return to after your hunts, in which you're going to go craft and upgrade your equipment, test out weapons and abilities before going back out on your next hunt. As we begin the game, you'll have a choice between 7 weapons and a basic set of armor. Then after you kill a few monsters, you'll be able to use their parts to craft better weapons and armor, that classic Monster Hunter system. The broken world I mentioned are basically these floating islands that have monsters all over them. These are known as the hunting grounds, which come in various biomes and feature different monsters that make sense in that biome. The game is all based on an element system that's simple and effective. You got fire, ice, lightning, and so on. So you'd craft a fire weapon to kill an ice monster and wear ice protection against it. You'll get yourself an elemental lantern to cast extra element attacks. Maybe you'll throw some elemental grenades at one point. You get the picture. There's a lot of options and a lot of unlocks, all tied to the Slayer's Path, which is that new progression system. It's a giant skill tree that gives you a lot of options on what to upgrade, with the long-term ability to fill it out entirely and get everything, or go on to Reforge and start again for some small benefits that should stay with you forever. To start out, you've just got a weapon and its moves, but before long, you've got various buffing potions, temporary weapon buffs, a spell-casting lantern, grenades, and so on. I just mentioned a lot of stuff offhandedly though, so let me explain some of them properly. The maps we play on are those islands that you unlock via progressing the game. The higher level you are, the more you're going to unlock, giving you access to more and more monsters and more biomes. The maps seem to get steadily bigger, with new biomes that could be, say, a frozen tundra, a hot desert, a lush green forest. It's all visually pretty, but unfortunately, very mechanically dull. Littered around the maps are plants and ores that you can gather. There'll be some chests to open if you have the keys, and some small monsters around there as well. There's going to be the various constantly respawning monsters that you go out and hunt until you're done and leave. And to traverse the map, you have a glider to zip around on, and there's boost vents as well to send you flying into the air. And that's about it. Sometimes there's special events instead of a monster, which is basically defend an area from multiple monsters, but the maps are going to play out the exact same way every time, just in a different visual setting. So while I do think the way the maps work is quite uninteresting and very simple, it does serve its purpose and lets you get to the reason we're playing the game, which is combat and monsters. I'll start with the combat, which has strengths and weaknesses. Dauntless currently has 7 weapons that greatly differ in mechanical quality. They're all visually impressive and neat, providing different ways to play from one another. They've all got unique combos and approaches to the combat, which is great. The quality differences that I mentioned, well, these come in how some weapons are well designed and others are not. Here's the newest weapon, the Striker Fists. With these bad boys, you have 3 main combos which result in 3 different attacks. By successfully performing a combo, you charge up a mantra, which can then be spent on techniques. At one mantra, you could use it to dash suddenly while punching enemies and refreshing your timer, or use it to do the technique Tempest Form, which will buff you up with attack speed. Instead, you could save that mantra and then perform another of the free combos. Now you're at 2 mantras, you can perform the Karma Breaker, which is a huge single strike that will do damage over time after that initial hit. Finally, by using the 3rd combo you haven't yet used, you could have 3 mantras, and then use that on the last technique, Adamant Bolt, which fires a cannon blast of energy at the target, dealing extra damage if you have the Tempest Form buff on, or if you've hit the monster with Karma Breaker, or of course, even more damage if you've done both beforehand. That is a really cool weapon concept. The mechanics are clever and engaging, the weapon is flashy and exciting, and rewards high level of skill. Like I said, this was the most recently added weapon to the game. Now let's talk about one of the earlier weapons, the pike. It works like this. You can do pierce attacks while stationary or harvest attacks while moving forward. You have the ability to do a few jumping, stabs, or slashes. After harvesting power, you can convert that into ammo, which can then be fired from the pike like a gun for a single long-range shot using that saved charge. And that's it. That's the pike. Now hold on before you write your triggered comment, pike mains. Let me just say this first. I think all the weapons in Dauntless are fun, and in concept, they're really cool. They're all unique. But you have to admit, there is a huge difference between some weapons and others in their mechanics. Some are very impressive and detailed, some are not. Not everything needs to be crazy complicated to be fun, but some weapons are just dated mechanically. That's what I'm trying to say. And it would seem like the Dauntless devs agree to what I'm saying because they're slowly reworking the original weapons to improve them, updating them to be more interesting mechanically and, importantly, rewarding to a skilled player. That's nothing but a good thing. Half the weapons are currently well designed, but in the meantime, there are a few weapons that are very dated, and I just need to acknowledge that. All the weapons will steadily improve in mechanics as you progress the game though. When you unlock legendary abilities tied to certain weapons, or unlock new specials via the Slayer's Path or elsewhere, maybe you're modding your weapon for new passive effects. It all makes the weapons more interesting as you progress the game, which of course makes sense. Overall though, the combat and control of your character is solid and Dauntless, even if I do have criticism for some of the weapons. Now on the other hand of combat, it's the monsters, which are wonderful visually. They're very cool. All these interesting element-based monsters gave the devs the ability to make some really interesting creatures. All the monsters have a main element they use, which makes them resistant to that element while weak to another. And their attacks will of course incorporate their main element into how they fight. The Sheik is this giant owl that uses wind element to its advantage in different ways. It shoots wind blasts at you, creates tornadoes. Like an airbender, it'll use the wind to zip around the fight, doing some charges or slams. It's sort of an iconic Dauntless monster. Another core monster to the game though, the Skarn, is like an earthbender who covers itself in hard rock, which it can manipulate, creating armor to defend itself or even attack you with. Whenever it does that, it'll actually remove the protection of the rock armor as it's exposed itself temporarily, which is a really good concept. The monsters all have deviants too, called variants in this game. Skarn, for example, could be Rockfall Skarn, or the heroic version, or Deep Frost Skarn, changing its core element, and with that, its weaknesses. So while there are lots of different types of monsters, there are also lots of different versions of them to further update the mechanics. Like the weapons though, there are some monsters that definitely feel a lot less interesting and are a lot more annoying to fight. Some monsters just don't have exciting telegraphed attacks, and they'll end up just hip checking you into oblivion, taking lovely chunks out of your health because oops, they turned around slightly. Many monsters are big, and therefore the hip check can be quite real. It's worst of all with monsters that have vents that spew out on 4 sides of them, which will constantly catch you as the monster turns around during combat about 100 times. So overall, I think the monster designs are great, the mechanics mostly being awesome. Sure, there are definitely some bad eggs in the lot, but honestly, Monster Hunter has some of those too. As you progress the game, the fights are going to get more mechanically demanding and a lot more interesting. I was watching Rage stream some endgame content the other night, and he was fighting this sort of strange void monster that I've not seen before in a sort of otherworldly plane, which obviously stands in stark contrast to me fighting this giant bug guy in a forest. So that gives me some hope and excitement for the current endgame that I'm working my way towards. Alright, so now let's talk about the new progression of the game, the Slayer's Path, which I do have a lot of praise for. It's a massive talent tree that steadily progresses while leveling your weapons and hunting monsters. It's tied to everything: crafting, potions, unlocking new monsters and islands and content, modding your equipment, new game modes, new combat abilities, just giving you lots of new options as you go. It's very clever. You level it just by playing the game and doing anything. and you choose how you want to spend your talents. And the choices actually matter. They cater to you specifically. The middle path is a main path that you will work your way up to the final level, while on the sides of those, you see all of the different choices, perks that benefit the weapon you're maining, choosing which types of potions to unlock and improve. Maybe you get yourself a better glider. It works really well and feels really good to progress. It's almost like the leveling part of an MMO before you reach cap. Eventually you can unlock everything on the path, but it's up to you what you unlock first based on what you're currently doing. So I think it was a really good idea and well executed, and has improved the core progression of the game as intended. Maybe it was invasive to originally inject this into a game that had an old system and this is a new one, but I think it's worth it. One thing I want to mention next though is how there isn't just one mission type. We're not just going on the hunting grounds and hunting various ever respawning monsters. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of the game, but there are other modes to consider. There's side quests, which will take you on unique, specific monster hunts that change the way that you play the game. In this case, I had to go against a special Sheik who was in a frost biome who could freeze me and also generate a snowstorm so heavy that I could barely see in front of myself. These missions give the devs a way to create unique and intense fights that you have to take more seriously. There's the escalations, which have a normal and hard mode for later in the game. These work as mini roguelike experiences where you face a gauntlet that gets harder and harder. But each time you defeat the current challenge, you'll get 3 new options to choose between, which are buffs that will power you up for the duration of the escalation. Permanent crit, better healing, immune effects, team play stuff. They're all crazy choices that are going to augment your combat ability massively while you have these more difficult fights thrown at you. Maybe you get lucky and get an insane build, or maybe you get unlucky and get a tame one. I think it works really well, pitting you against monsters you wouldn't normally see together. Honestly, this is something I would like to see in the Monster Hunter series. It's a really good game mode. Lastly, there's also the Trials, which is a late game Slayer path unlock, which are described as arena style hunts against extra hard monsters in return for currency. I haven't actually unlocked those yet because it's like right at the end, so I can't really talk about it. All right, moving on, I want to talk about 3 other main aspects of the game real quick. Firstly, crossplay. I'm going to say it, the fact that Monster Hunter does not have crossplay is a huge misstep and failure of that series. The fact that I can't play with people on console while I'm on PC is hugely disappointing. It means I can't play with a lot of my friends and viewers who are just on different platforms, and it really sucks. Dauntless is out here with an insane roster of crossplay and has had it in game for over 2 years. The game's free to play on PlayStation, Switch, Xbox, and PC, and you can play together whatever you're doing. So I never had any issue queuing to play with others, doing anything at any time. I can play with my friends very easily, and I think that's a huge selling point for Dauntless and a huge plus for the game. That is something I really want to see in Monster Hunter at some point. Next, the monetization. It is a free-to-play game, so it does have microtransactions, and this comes in a few forms. An obvious one is the Battle Pass system that we see in many games at this point. Buy the pass, play the game, get skins and emotes, and so on. It's pretty tame. Some games definitely have more interesting rewards than Dauntless does. And then there's the shop, which sells cosmetics and more specific items for your money directly, which also has boosters in it for faster progression. I will say, though, that the game doesn't have anything like PvP, so it doesn't actually technically matter what other players are doing in their game. It won't affect you in any way how fast they're progressing, but it's something to be aware of. XP boosters are in the game. Finally, the visuals. It's a very bright and colourful game, and that might really appeal to you since it's very stylized and I think easy on the eyes, but it could be very jarring and maybe too childish for you. It's up to you to decide. People refer to its style as like a Fortnite Monster Hunter, and I think that's funny, but I get the comparison. Personally, I really like how the game looks. I think it's a fun take on the Monster Hunter genre. Not too serious, but with the ability to actually create environments and of course monsters that can be intense and intimidating all the same. But it is subjective. If you like it or you don't, I think you'll probably know when you first look at the game. But that's everything I feel like I need to talk about after playing the game again. In conclusion, Dauntless is far from a bad game. It's got a good progression system, a bunch of weapons that are unique, many monsters to challenge and overcome, and a bunch of environments to do it in. Sure, I have criticism for different aspects of the game, like weapons lacking mechanical qualities of others, some monsters being quite awkward and clunky, and there certainly isn't the same detail to the builds as Monster Hunter. But none of that would make me say it's a bad game. You just need to know what you're getting into. It's like Rage said, it's a Monster Hunter light experience. Streamlined to be very easy to get into, but never as in-depth as any of the Monster Hunter series. It's one of the best, if not the best, Monster Hunter alternative we could ask for. It hits the mark across the board, if not quite hitting the bullseye on any. So should you play Dauntless in 2021? Yeah, if you're a Monster Hunter fan, it's definitely one to try. And the best part is it's going to cost you nothing to do so. But let me know your thoughts about Dauntless and how it's doing these days. And if you enjoyed the video, do drop a like to support this type of content. Let me know if I should make more of this in the future. Until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.